And please welcome James and Courtney.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shobha. And we want to thank the conference committee for having us kick off this session.
Yes.
This in-person session. So as Shobha said, my name is Courtney J. Boddie. I am Vice President, Education and School Engagement at the New Victory, New 42, and I created this podcast, Teaching Artistry with Courtney J. Boddie, about 7 years ago, mainly because I wanted to make sure that all the amazing work that we do in this field can be uplifted on some type of platform, and I got to talk to people and learn about what they do and how they think and where they come from and why they do what they do as a way for my own learning, but I thought also this could be an opportunity for us to feel cohesive and feel the community that actually exists. So thank you so much. For having us, and I'm just going to give a visual description of myself. I'm a light-skinned black woman with white-framed glasses, short golden, naturally curly hair. I'm wearing a hunter green t-shirt, a burgundy pleather jacket, and navy blued wide legs pants and brown booties. James, you want to introduce yourself?
What's up, everyone? Greetings and salutations. I'm James Miles, the Fresh Professor, he, him pronouns. As Shobha said, Creative Economy Manager for the City of Seattle's Office of Economic Development, Assistant Professor at Seattle University, AKA Fresh Professor, doing my thing with Courtney B. I'm a middle-aged, light-skinned black man with a nappy fro, and I think this is gray. Gray sweater? Gray, thank you. Gray sweater with a blue button-down collar, blue jeans, and brown boots.
Excellent.
That's what I do. I talk about myself.
You look good.
You look great.
Thank you. Hey. So Teaching Artistry celebrates artists, culture, and equity, and this session is being recorded, right? Yes, thank you. Thank you to our sound and tech folk over there. And it will be published as the next episode after this month sometime soon. All right, so the way that this is going to work is I'm going to have a few questions for James. James is going to read some excerpts that will also be visually viewed on the screens. And then we're going to open up for a little bit of conversation and any questions, which is where we'll use those index cards. And then we'll close. Sound good? Excellent. All right. So James.
Yes.
We recently celebrated the 50th anniversary of hip-hop in New York City and America.
And the world.
And the world.
Yes.
It is a global
It's a global phenomenon.
thing. And there's a lot going on. That it means, and it was born right here in New York City in the Boogie Down Bronx. And so why this book? Why does this book really makes a case for hip-hop in schools and sort of shares some of the roots it has in our culture, and specifically in arts education. And so, for somebody like me, who I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm an expert, but I enjoy, and I have a sense of the history, and I know how embedded it is in our culture. But that said, thinking about shifting minds or making a case for this, why is hip-hop education important in our schools? Why is it important now?
Oh, hip-hop is so important. Grandmaster Caz, and this is in my book, Grandmaster Caz says, hip-hop didn't invent anything, it reinvented everything. And I think that's why hip-hop's important in schools. We've had this trajectory of education that's been the same for the past 200 years. Our achievement gap's growing. Inequities are growing inside of classrooms. Students aren't connecting to content. I mean, my own children, they bring home homework, and they have to write about X, Y, Z. And I'm like, why are you writing about this? I don't know. Does it mean anything to you? No. Then why are you doing it? I don't know. Why don't we have classroom content that connects to young people? When I first started teaching in the 90s, I was teaching in International High School in Queens. And I was teaching Shakespeare. And the assignment was like, all right, teach these young people Romeo and Juliet. And I was like, okay. So I started teaching about Shakespeare, and they were all English language learners. And I was like, do you all connect to this content? And they're like, no. I said, all right, what if Romeo was Shakira and Juliet was J-Lo? And they're like, oh, that's wild. Why would that happen? I said, what would happen? Oh, man, they got mad beef. Colombia and Puerto Rico. And I said, okay, keep going. They're like, yeah, and then if their families start getting into it, what's going to happen then? And I was like, something clicked in my mind to connect what young people are listening to, digesting, reading, putting into their ears and minds and hearts, and bring that to the classroom. So that's the genesis of Gotta Stay Fresh. And then a couple years ago, like a decade ago, I was working on this program with my brother Michael Wiggins, Jamel Mims, Augustina, I think she's here, and Danny over there, I see her, what's up? We're all doing this program together, and we're like, yo, what if we bring this not just in high schools, because that's what we were doing, but also in the middle schools, and get students, when they're at that crux of like, do I want to continue my high school journey, or is high school not for me? And grab them there and say, like, let's make it happen. So we brought in this music, we brought in arts education content, and we changed the lives of these young people in East New York, in Brooklyn, and Harlem. So I don't know why you need hip-hop in schools, but I know you need it in hip-hop in schools.
I forgot to say, next slide.
Next slide.
And maybe the following, I can't see, so I don't know. What's on the slide?
It's the logo.
Oh, perfect,
Yeah.
yes. We're good. That is
great.
it. So I remember when you worked with those folks, and I actually remember you doing a presentation at this conference.
Yes.
Let's say a decade ago, and I was in it, and I remember the room was packed.
Yes.
Packed. And I remember, and not just because I like you so much, but like I remember being really impressed and intrigued and finding ways to connect the framework that you all were presenting in that session around hip hop and hip hop education, or how to integrate it into arts education, to the way I work and the work I do, which is mainly around theater.
Yes.
And just sort of making those same things, like with the example that you just gave, of how do we really use examples that are meaningful to young people when we are having to teach subjects that may not have a deep connection to them or a natural one right away. So to that end, I wonder what people are thinking right now. Like, what would you suggest to arts educators who don't necessarily identify with the hip hop culture or feel like they can't connect to the framework that you're laying forth?
If I say hip hop hooray, what do you say? We all know hip hop. So I think even if you don't listen to hip hop, it's in your eardrum. It's like Taylor Swift. It's like, we're just joking, it's like Kanye West, right? You may not care about Kanye, and I'm sure no one does, but you know what he's doing. You know he exists. And if you know it, so do young people. So you don't have to be a hip hop head to connect with young people. You just have to listen to what they're talking about and be interested and be curious. I think that's the key to really inculcating hip hop into your lesson plans. It's less about like, are you an MC? Can you break dance? Can you DJ? Can you graffiti? It's more like, well, how do you express yourself visually? What are you saying in class that you may not be saying to other people? If I combine this and that, what's that mean for you? What language are you using? What references are you making in class? If a young person comes into class and is like, no cap, Professor Miles, this lesson was bad mid. You go like this, right on. It was bad mid. How do I increase it? It's not captivity. Like, how do I make it cool or dope? Or no one says dope anymore. How do I make it fresh? Yeah. Wave, yeah.
Oh, sorry, were you saying?
No, I'm listening to you.
Oh, no, I'm happy to keep listening to you.
No, this is great.
Do you want to read a little something?
I'll read something.
Let's move to the next slide.
Yes.
So this is an excerpt from your book. Not that one.
Not this one?
Not that one.
Which one?
The one on 103.
103. Okay. Yes, I'll read this one. All right.
Okay.
This part of the book's called Knowledge of Self. I don't trust people who don't love themselves and tell me I love you. There's an African saying which is, be careful when a naked person offers you a shirt. That's Maya Angelou. When talking about hip hop, we often focus on the performative aspects as main facets of the culture. The music, fashion, graffiti, and dance. However, the most important pillar of hip-hop was the last to be fully developed, and that's knowledge of self. Educator Dr. Bettina Love and her team describe knowledge of self as understanding that knowing yourself, your abilities, your interests, and the things that affect you are the key to using the other elements, graffiti, DJing, rapping, and b-boying, to work towards the change in your community. Knowledge of self says that we don't have to be defined by our environment or what people say about us. We can be in charge of our own destiny. As activist Oriel Lucier beautifully stated, hip-hop opened my eyes to the trauma our people are still trying to process and heal. Once your eyes are open, you want everyone to see as clearly as you do. Hip-hop artist and entrepreneur Jay-Z succinctly and eloquently describes knowledge of self by saying, believe in oneself and knowing who you are. I mean, that's the foundation of everything great. Young people of all identities enter a school setting that is more likely very different from their home lives. Some adapt to the new environment, but many others lose a sense of themselves and struggle to connect to their teachers and sometimes their peers. Without consistent support at home and at school, these young people suffer. They need their school role models, the adults, to see them as contributing members of the class and the school building. So it is incumbent on us to intentionally help students develop their sense of self, have pride in themselves, and love themselves. That is knowledge of self.
Nice.
Yes.
Listening to that excerpt, it's making me think about trauma-informed practices. We've done a lot of work more recently around that. Where the idea of connecting to the self, feeling pride in oneself. How do you see those two, this work and trauma-informed practices connecting?
They're very much intertwined, right? If we think about fight, flight, or freeze syndrome that many young people and adults for that matter go to when put in stressful situations, their behavior is to seek or avoid something, right? That's all human behavior. And when we're stressed, our dendrites in our brain move at a rapid pace. Like, think of Wi-Fi versus, plug-in internet. Dial-up, yes. It's been a long time. Dial-up internet. So when we're stressed, we move quickly to our those behaviors. When hip-hop does, if you try to meet young people to where they are, you're lowering their cortisol, right? You're decreasing their stress amounts and saying, like, all right, how do we change this behavior, right? How do we utilize the neuroplasticity of the brain to say, like, because I asked you a question and you don't want to talk, your first response doesn't have to be, man, I ain't doing this. No, I ain't doing this, right? If I say, hey, Jamal, hey, Denise, hey, young person, what would Kanye West say about this concept? Their cortisol levels are lowered because you're saying, all right, so it's not about me, it's about what someone else is thinking. Okay, one, that's very theater, that's very process
theater.
drama, right? And two, is putting the content, making it relevant to their lives. So that's where that knowledge of self, it helps like that neuroplasticity of the brain to slow down those automative behaviors, those maladaptive behaviors, and turn them into something, quote unquote, adaptive, adapting to the environment that they're existing in.
Cool. Thanks for going with that question.
Sure, yeah. I like talking about neuroscience. I'm a nerd.
We should keep going because I
Yes.
think that's part of,
Yeah.
to me, that
Yeah.
makes sense too, yeah.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the way, well, first I want to ask a different question before
Yes.
I'm going to ask about the frame, like how
Yeah.
the book is framed. Why, like how long did it take you to write this book, and what was the process?
Yes. Ooh, good question. So we wrote a book with the Fresh program in 2015. And then I wanted to write a follow-up from that book after we all left the program. So I started writing in 2018. 2019, 2020, what happened in 2020, I paused. And I was at South by Southwest in 2019, actually. In 2019, someone says, hey, you're the Fresh professor. We need that follow-up book. And it was my publisher, my current publisher. And I said, all right, yeah, okay. All right, give me that energy. And I got to it. And then my dad got really sick. I was headed towards a divorce. I started having some mental wellness, like struggles. I got really depressed. I was working on a job I I just hated it. I was going to say something nice, but like, nah, that job sucked. So I stopped writing the book for like 2 years. And then I went back to South by Southwest in 2022. 2022. And I was with my friend Helea DeBarros, who also was on the Arts and Education Roundtable. And we met the same publisher. And she says, hey, where's your book? And I said, I'll get to it. And then someone yells my name across the room. Yo, fresh professor, your book changed my life. We need your book. I'm using it now in Brazil. I want that second book. And I said, you really used my book in Brazil? And they're like, yes. And where's the next book coming out? And so I looked at Helea and I looked at the publisher and I said, all right, I got to get to work. Coincidentally, at the same time, these two hip-hop artists were also at South by Southwest, Wordsworth and Jay Rawls. Wordsworth was on Black Star's album, and Jay Rawls produced it. And so they were like, yo, you're Fresh Professor, I heard about you. And I was like, you heard about me? That's wild. And they said, yeah, yo, let's work together. And I said, okay. And so those things happening together got me into my book writing mode again. So I went back home, quit my job, thank God, quit that job, and every day from 7 to 9 a.m., I wrote for like a year. I just wrote all day, or for 2 hours every day. And then at night, I would try to tweak some things I wrote in the morning. Saturdays and Sundays, I would just ideate and think about things, listen to music, read magazines. So it took me about a year and a half to write this book. And then I just started saying it to the publisher, like, here's pages, here's chapters. And they quickly copy edited and got it out, and it came out December of 2023. So it took about a year and a half to just get that going, yeah.
I didn't know all of that. I mean, I knew a lot of what was happening, but I didn't know that whole story, so thank you for sharing that. Talk us through, like, how is this structured?
Yes.
And when I was reading it, maybe because I know you so well, but it sounds like it's your voice.
Yes,
yeah.
Thank you. So there's 6 different parts, right? The liner notes, which is like the introduction, books dedicated to one of my closest friends who passed away when we were 23 years old. We had a falling out, and we were mad at each other, and then we realized, why are we mad at each other? So she wrote me a letter, and I was like, oh, yeah, I'm gonna write a letter. Oh, wait, but I gotta do this thing. So I wrote her a letter the next day, and I sent the letter. The following day, her mother calls me and says she had a brain aneurysm and died. So it destroyed me. So this book has always been dedicated to her, right? So it starts with that liner note. And then I talk about, like, the origin story. How did hip-hop begin? You know, from the South Bronx, August 1973, right, on Sedgwick Avenue. Where's the history of education? How did education in this country begin in Massachusetts? And then I connect the dots between hip-hop and education, the burgeoning growth of a subculture that became the culture. And then I talk about graffiti and how images are used in both education spaces and in hip-hop, and then the neuroscience, one of my favorite parts. And then I get into, like, why we celebrate hip-hop, why it's part of the culture, how it became part of the culture, how to integrate that into an arts-based educational lesson, whether focused on arts or something quote-unquote academic, like math, science, history, English. And then I provide some sample lessons. How do you do this? You know, for anyone that wants to become a hip-hop educator, how do you do this? And I break it down through the 5 elements of hip-hop, which are emceeing, DJing, graffiti, breaking, and knowledge of self. And then I close it with a shout-out. You know, in hip-hop, we give people our flowers. Everything in hip-hop is about collaboration and success, right? There's something called a cipher. When MCs are in a circle, and they're rapping to each other, and even though they may be insulting one another, it's really iron sharpens iron. They're trying to be the best MC to improve themselves so that they get respect in that cipher. And that's what hip-hop does. It's like, I want you to be the best, because if you're the best, that makes me better. So I want to give everyone their flowers for supporting me. So that includes everyone in this room, like Edie and Shoba and Courtney and Lindsay, who may have left. And everyone that knew Vic, that was like my ground, you know, my training ground. So NYU, where I taught for several years, like, everyone deserves their flowers. So that's a big portion of my book is giving props to my crew. Jamel, the whole Fresh team, Wiggins, Chicago, New York, Seattle.
Nice. I've never been to the South by Southwest conference. Do you want to just talk
We're
about
gonna
that
go.
for a second? We're gonna go?
Yeah, we're gonna go.
You and me? What?
Yeah, we're gonna go. South by Southwest is a very popular music and education conference. Happens in March of every year. The first week's dedicated to education. Then it gets to the music, film, comedy, and technology portions. People come from all over the world to South by Southwest. It's considered the place to be for many different fields, many different sectors, all creative sectors. So I started going there in 2014 and presented on hip hop. Just like, hey, this is something that I don't see here. And when I was there, it was Jamel, myself, Michael Wiggins, and I think we were the only people of color at the entire conference. And I was like, and I talked to the GM, and I said, yo, where is everyone? He's like, that's a great question, James. And so he's like, will you be on the board? And I said, sure. So I got I was happy to be on the board, started reading proposals for South by Southwest, was seeing many different diverse proposals, started saying like, oh, this is one we should take in, this is one we should take in. And now, 2024 we just had, the conference is incredibly diverse, both in race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, national origin, ability, and even in age. In 2017, I think I went to South by Southwest with 10 teenagers. And it was the first time teenagers were presenting and just present at the conference. Not like, oh, come to the conference, see this, and leave. It's like, no, they're part of the conference. They had their badges. They were in all the after parties. And every year, more and more young people are present. And I think that's the power of hip-hop, because hip-hop is about like, yo, we're gonna bum rush the stage like Wu-Tang and 89 Tech 9, where I'm just gonna walk in, yo, Stretch and Bobbito, let us on the radio. And that's the ethos of hip-hop. We're gonna come in the room and we're gonna blow it up, and it's for the good of everyone. So that's South by Southwest.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. I can't see, and so I don't think oh, good. Let's go to the next slide. Can you read the section around time for action?
Time for some action. Yep. Given that many students who feel unseen, unwelcome, unacknowledged, or unsafe in their schools, it should be no surprise that many are unengaged in school and struggling both socially and academically. And it's critically that we work to confront and combat racism, transphobia, and other prejudices in school and beyond. At the same time, within our classrooms, we can foster safe, welcoming spaces. We can deliver lessons that are creative, inspiring, and designed with our students in mind, not a generic abstraction of what a student is or should be. The benefits of this are many, and they include academic concerns. Students' unwillingness to participate in the process of learning is often largely due to the fact that the typical style of presenting is detached from their own cultural understandings. And research going back decades shows that presentation style is often a deciding factor in the choice of how, when, and why students engage in their own learning process. As one report put it, teaching that ignores student norms of behavior and communication provokes student resistance, while teaching that is responsive prompts student involvement. Again, the pandemic provided an opportunity to redesign educational practices, to reimagine education and build a system where every student feels seen, heard, and valued, and where creativity is fomented and cultivated. Yet rote memorization and standardized testing continue to dominate the educational spaces. Though we haven't fully capitalized on that opportunity yet, our time is coming. The issues we're facing in our classrooms and across education are complex, but with open minds and new ideas, we can take positive action. Time for some action.
Time for some action.
Yeah.
Okay, so my synapses are firing. Going back to the quote that you said in the previous excerpt.
Yes.
Who said that again?
Maya Angelou?
The reinventing.
Oh, that's Grandmaster Cass.
Grandmaster Cash.
Yeah.
Yeah, the idea of reinvention, it feels like that's inherent in that particular excerpt. Two thoughts that are coming to my brain around anti-oppressive work and the idea of like you're talking to most people in the arts and culture field. There are some classroom teachers here or other educators that work within a school system. We tend to be invited into that system, but we're not running that system.
Yes.
And you're in Seattle also,
Right.
thinking about just education from public education. Let's talk about skeptics.
Yes.
Let's talk about anti-oppressive work.
Yes.
Let's talk about, like who else are you talking to? And how are you talking about where this work can be applied? Like, can it be applied in the early childhood sector?
Yes.
Talk about that.
Yes. Skeptics are abundant. You mentioned hip hop and the immediate responses. No, that's too violent. No, we can't do that. Meanwhile, we're talking about American history, which is pretty violent. So what do you say to the skeptics? You say, what's working in your schools right now? Nothing? Then why not try something new? I think that's number one. Number two is you have to put the teachers and the administrators in the role of the students. I remember long ago when I was teaching this, and I said, and the principal's like, I don't know if this is going to work. And I said, let me try it with your teachers. And we tried it with the teachers. I was with my boy John Robinson, and we were talking about communism and capitalism. It was right about the Cold War. And we've had the teachers enroll as students arguing, battling each other, hip-hop style, about communism and capitalism. The teachers got so animated, the principal looked at me and said, okay, you may have something. And so when I brought it into the classroom, the same thing happened. I started talking about capitalism and communism using M&Ms as a reference. Like, I'll give you M&Ms if you answer the question right. If you're a communist, you have to share the M&Ms with your friends. And the students were like, no, that's wrong, man. No, this is a capitalist society, bro. And I was like, nah, son, no, I got this answer correct, man. This belongs to me. I said, what's the value of communism? For those that didn't answer the question, well, I still get to eat. And I was like, why is that important? Because not everyone has access to food. Okay, what else can we talk about? So we dug deep into communism and capitalism with M&Ms, and then we used Drake and Meek Mill as a reference point, because at that point they were having a Twitter argument. So it wasn't really a hot war, it was a cold war. So we're like, all right, so there's a reference point. So I think when people see it in action, it works. Also, it's clear when I talk about hip hop, I don't mean just rap music. I mean the culture of young people. And the culture of young people is not just one simplistic definition of music. It's Taylor Swift, it's Miley Cyrus, it's Beyonce, it's Andre 3000, who both produced albums that were not hip hop, right? They produced a jazz album and a country album, but they were still defined as hip hop because they're part of the global culture of popular music, right? If you go to anywhere, like go to Korea, you go to Japan, you look up popular music, you'll see hip hop alongside Taylor Swift, alongside Miley Cyrus, alongside Ye and Jay-Z and Beyonce. It's all considered hip hop. So that's what I talk about, like bringing in the culture of young people, the language they use, those words I was saying earlier, like no cap and mid, that's all hip hop. The way young people dress, which, it's still regional. The young people in Seattle dress like they're still asleep. Like, why are you in pajamas, bro? So it's still regional, but for the most part, it's the way they wear their clothes is still evident in the culture that they consume. So it's just like really connecting with young people. If a young person cannot learn the way we teach, we must teach the way they learn, right? That's the essence of using hip hop in schools. And once an administrator gets it, they get it. And I've worked with administrators all over the world, and it takes a while for them to understand it, but once you put them in their shoes of students, they truly, truly get it. That's it.
I guess I'm also wondering, just thinking about reinventing systems.
Oh,
Like,
yes.
let's go, you were talking at the school level.
At the school level,
a
yeah.
principal who is, the system maker of a particular school or site, right?
Yeah.
But what about, like, who else are you talking to in Gub'ment?
Yeah, I'm talking to, like, I was hanging out with Cardona not long ago, but when he was the education secretary, and talking to him about why hip-hop is in schools, he got it, but he's still at the behest of the standardized tests. If we want to really reinvent schools, we got to get rid of testing. Just get rid of standardized testing, right? Just every educational psychologist, every educational practitioner says testing doesn't do anything. It tests a young person's ability to know something at one point in time, on a certain day, a certain week, at a certain time of the day, at a certain period of their life, right? That doesn't anything. What you can do is assess, and you can constantly assess student comprehension, and that's a continual process. It can't be just regulated to one day or 1 month of the year, like, here, we're gonna test you for 6 days straight. Like, who's gonna do well in that situation? No one. So, one, get rid of standardized testing. Two, we need art in schools. That's it. Full stop. Full stop. Put art in schools. We lost arts, we lost civics, we lost culinary arts, we lost all that in schools. Put them back in the arts. Put them back in the schools, I mean. Because we want to make well-rounded human beings, we need to teach them well-rounded education. So that's hip-hop in itself, too. Like, who's the guy? Action Bronson, cooking. Like, we need people cooking food for us. There's a group out of Atlanta that rap about, food deserts and why it's important to talk about, like, healthy eating, right? All of this is important, and it goes back to my concept of using hip-hop in schools. So 1, testing. 2, arts. 3, civics. And then 4 is the easiest thing we could do is just ask students questions and listen to what they have to say. Really be interested in their answers. Connect with young people. There's something called positive greeting at the door. Raise your hand if you've heard of that term. So positive greeting at the door is something you do in classrooms. You've seen it on TV with like the fist bumps and the dances. You don't have to go that deep. But just a positive greeting like, hi, Courtney. Hi, Edie. Doing that every day saves 10 minutes per week. For a month, you save an entire class period of time just by saying, hi, I see you. You're a person. You're a human being. I love you. That saves so much time. Easy. But how many teachers do that? Get in the class, pull your belt up, take your hat off, take your hood off. Instead of saying, hey, Edie, I appreciate you taking glasses off. Hey, Shoba, can you take your hood off? It's that simple. It's that simple. Just positive greeting instead of this didactic and tyrannical oppression in schools right now.
Okay.
You have more?
I have 1,000 questions. We're also like way ahead of schedule, so we're gonna open it up soon.
Okay.
But when does appreciation become appropriation?
If you walk into class wearing like Adidas and a tracksuit and say, yeah, boy, that's appropriation. Just don't do that. But if you walk into class and say, hey, I'm very interested in talking about this concept, let's look at how Miley Cyrus's Flowers is reminiscent of Bruno Mars' song, and what's the connection there? Let's use some literary language to describe it. That is not appropriation. That's appreciation. Appropriation is when you try to be something you're not. I had a teacher I worked with in East New York. She's like, I'm not really hip-hop. And I said, that's fine. She's like, can I just be myself? And I said, please do. So she came to class, and she says, hi, I'm a record producer. I'm Rick Rubin, and we're gonna make some music. And I need some people to write some songs over here, and these people over here. She had a picture of the Beatles behind her. She's like, great. And I was like, that's the most hip-hop teaching I've ever seen, because she broke the students down into subsections of a music industry, and then had them work on a project together, and I thought it was brilliant. She was not trying to be hip-hop. She just was hip-hop. It was perfect.
So you could take your own art form,
of course,
and infuse these concepts into it.
Yes.
So if it's theater or visual art, the idea of like creating some sort of real-world, almost project-based experience.
Kind of project-based learning, yeah. If we break it down into the 5 elements of hip-hop, right, which are emceeing, DJing, graffiti, breakdancing, and knowledge of self, right? Emceeing, right, we think of emceeing as the rapper, but emceeing in the classroom is like, how are you using your voice? How are students using their voice, right? Equally important. Graffiti, how are you expressing yourself visually to the students, and how are they expressing themselves visually to you and to each other? You know, if they're coming to school every day in pajamas, like they're in Seattle, you acknowledge it, right? And so maybe you don't change the way you dress, but you say, okay, you seem very comfortable. Let's make this exciting. Let's mix it up like a DJ would. So DJ mixes two things that are alike or maybe unlike, and combines them to create something new.
So I'm hearing in the graffiti is about self-expression,
Yes.
fashion.
Fashion's a part of it.
Yeah.
The way they draw on their laptops or their folders, that's all part of graffiti. And encouraging that, right? When a young person or old, draws while in class or in a lecture, it lowers their stress levels, right? It helps them process what is being told to them. So when we say, put your pens down, listen to me talk, we're actually inhibiting that learning process. When you're allowing a young person to just draw and noodle and doodle, they're figuring things out for themselves, and that's great. That's what you need to do, because there's some essence in lowering those cortisol levels from just doodling that supports the induction of content. So yes, graffiti. DJing, breaking, how we're using your body, right? Are you standing at the front of the class, never connecting with the students throughout the entire lesson? Or are you walking around the class? Are you at the same level all the time? Are you standing? Are you sitting? Are you kneeling? Are you getting close to students?
Yeah, I think of that as blocking.
Blocking,
Like
yeah.
always the activities, like
Yes,
what's
exactly.
the formation, where are the kids going to be, where am I going to be? That's how I
Yes.
think so. Okay.
Yeah.
Listening, man.
Yes, but that's it. This is very much blocking. Graffiti is very much like storyboarding or set design. And then knowledge of self, of course, is sense of belonging, sense of self, creating that sense of community within the classroom, love of oneself, right? All that's inherent in a hip-hop classroom, and anyone can do it. And that's why I think it's so important. And it's, as you said, it's across every discipline, whether you're a theater maker, visual arts, a dancer, a musician, it's all there. You just have to access it and connect to it.
Awesome. Final question before we open it
Yes.
up. Although I have 20 more, but
I love questions.
I'll ask this question. So you said that this was published or released in December of 23. So
December
that's
23, yeah.
about 5 months now.
Yeah.
What's been the response so far?
Response has been really good. I was in LA and with what's it called? The Philharmonic, LA Philharmonic, and they started using my books to teach. I'll be in DC. It's gonna be part of the what's it called? The Turnaround Arts. They're gonna start using my books in Turnaround Arts. Chicago Public Schools have just bought my books to use for their classrooms, teachers. And now in Brazil, they're using my books in Brazil, which just blows my mind. So the response has been great, and I'm still on tour. I'm hoping to go to my alma mater and give it some love to Atlanta at Morehouse, and that's yeah. I just want to get my book everywhere. So I really want people to teach and connect with students. It's not really about me. It's really about connecting with students. Yeah.
Awesome. So thanks for sharing all of that.
I will do anything you ask, Courtney.
Don't say that. Because you never
What
know
I
I'm
get
gonna
myself into. What I get myself into.
But we thought you all might want to have a little chat. I'm hoping that you have questions, but first we have a question for you. So we could go to the slide with the question. I don't know. I can't see. We're good.
Yes.
Okay. So can you turn and talk to your neighbors? How do we impact change in the arts and education field based on this kind of conversation and the premise of the book and the kinds of framework that James has laid out in front of us? Have a chat about that, and then we'll tell you what's next. So as you're having your conversations, we also want to invite you to think about questions that you might have for James. and find a way to wrap up your conversations in 30 seconds. Round out that last thought in 15 seconds. Okay, so we are eager, so eager.
Eager beaver.
Eager. We're so eager to hear or learn what you have been chatting about. And we're also wondering about what questions you have. So on your chair, you have an index card, and I think there are extra. So if you would like to ask a question, please jot it down and our volunteers will pick them up. But also, we'd love to hear what you were just talking about. So if you could jot that down as what were your responses to this question? What are some ideas that are popping for you? It sounded like juicy conversation, so we want to hear. And then James is going to read out the responses that you have, the ideas that you have, and I'm going to read the questions that are being popping for you, and have James then answer those questions. So we'll take a moment to have you jot those down, and in a moment then we'll get it started. So you can still talk if you want.
Get your steps in.
Okay, so this is the first question. Oh, that's right, I'm asking. How does hip hop in education differ from culturally responsive teaching education? And what are the nuances?
Great question. I think it depends on the interpretation. I think hip hop pedagogy and culture responsive pedagogy are the same. And also can be construed as different. If you're talking about culture responsive pedagogy, often talks about like ethnic, national culture, racial culture. When I use hip hop, it's youth culture. So they're both responding to a culture, just how you frame it is differently. But they're the same. I think a good hip hop educator or a good culture responsive educator is using hip hop paradigms in their work.
Sorry, I was waiting for another question.
Yeah.
So
This is good.
That makes sense to me, what you were talking about,
Yeah.
culture responsive.
I just remembered something, and I want to share it before I forget. We have the three class agreements, right? In New Vic.
We don't do that as much, but yes.
Yes.
That was a time.
I still incorporate that into my work, and I would do mic check and have the students say 1 2 1 2. Mic check. Right. The young people were like, "Yo, we don't say that no more." And so my friend John Robinson says, "All right, what do we do?" And the young person said, "Red Robin." And that's a new way to grab the students' attention. And it came from the mouth of young people. So I just wanted to share that.
Love that. Okay, so we've got a good set of questions
Yes.
here. And what's nice is that we have time.
Yes, we have time.
So first, here's some thoughts from the question.
Your thoughts on combining Afro-Caribbean, jazz, hip-hop? Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. That's the answer. Yes. If you talk to Busta Rhymes, he will say hip-hop started in Jamaica. So if you talk about Afro-Caribbean, yes. I mean, it all comes from the same drum, so to speak. I often integrate reggaeton, reggae, Rastafarianism, everything into my classrooms, not because I'm trying to push a certain diaspora or paradigm, but because that's what young people are interested in, and it's what they're talking about. So yes, incorporating all jazz, hip hop, Afro-Caribbean, it all is all together. It's all the culture. It's
right.
The culture.
And there's influences of other kinds of genres.
Oh, yeah.
And then if anybody's listening to Beyonce's Act 2, genres are a funny concept. So
Yes.
The idea of like that goes back to DJing, right? Where you can you could start with music that is speaking to them or that they're listening to right now and broaden from there,
Yes.
or branch out from there.
Yeah.
So that takes us to this question, which is, please give a concrete example of a specific activity or lesson in your book. And before you answer that, the way that the book is laid out is there are actual activities in there that you call teachable moments, which I love.
Let me open up to, my book's on sale in the back, by the way. Let me find some fun ones. Concrete example. Okay. Have students. This is kind of process drama-y, but have students enroll, right? So you're picking 2 people, 3 people, 4 people in literature and history and science. Have the students take on those personas. Bring a hat in. I'm Abraham Lincoln, right? Ask that student enroll. All right, President Lincoln, what are your thoughts on, prohibition? What are your thoughts on abolition? What are your thoughts on Tennessee or Mississippi? And the students will answer that enroll. You'd move that into a rap battle, right? So you could have President Lincoln battling Andrew Jackson in a rap battle. And you give them some content words you have to include. They could work on it as a group and create 3, 4 bars, right, which are just, rhyming patterns, and have them battle it out to each other. Why is President Lincoln the best? Why is Andrew Jackson the best? That's a concrete example of something you could do in class. Incorporates hip-hop ecosystem, but you wouldn't necessarily say like, oh, that's hip-hop, because they're talking about Andrew Jackson and President Lincoln.
We're gonna have so many questions.
I have so many answers.
So many questions.
No, I don't.
Okay, here, I'm gonna start with this one.
Yes.
Oh, I had it and then here we go. How do we use a hip hop education framework to support youth with current events, i.e., migration journeys, tensions around war, effects of inflation?
Ooh, I think those are just so inherent in the work, right? If we talk about inflation, how to use hip hop to talk about inflation? You could bring in like how much Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora pay their artists to stream music, right? Even bring it into the film world, right? My crew was on strike. WGA and SAG-AFTRA were on strike for 6 months last year, right? All tied to the economic policies and structures in place. So bring it into what they're seeing on TV or not seeing on TV and talk about it in the classroom. I think that's one way to talk about inflation. Migration patterns is talking about your favorite MCs. Where's your favorite MC from, right? My favorite MC is from Memphis, Atlanta, Florida, New York, Texas, California, all right? Where do those people get their influences from, right? Why does Texas music sound different than California music? What are the influences there, right? They have the more twangy, more of a drawl in Texas than California. We have that funk flavor, because that's what happens in California. That's where funk was born, in the Northern California, versus New York, where it's a bit more in your face because of the way we speak our words, right? It's all language patterns that connects to how we move about this country and this world, for that matter.
I'm covered in questions.
I see that.
Next question.
Yes.
I'm no longer going to respond. I'm just going to pepper you with all these questions.
Great.
There's so many. Some of them I will maybe combine because there are some similarities. But
Yes.
There's a question here. As a white person, please continue to offer ways to integrate hip hop culture without seeing or seemingly being culturally appropriated.
Yes. White people listen to hip hop too. I think that's number one. So, I would just say bring in whatever young people are into, regardless of your identity, right? It's mostly about the young people, right? We must center the youth. So if young people are talking about Beyonce, then bring in Beyonce. It's not going to look one way or the other if you're like, hey, I listened to, Beyonce's version of Jolene, and compared to Dolly Parton's version of Jolene, to Amy Winehouse's version of Jolene, right? You can just talk about it, right? It's not about identity, it's about the sound, it's about connecting to young people. So I would worry less about trying to appropriate, don't say the N-word, but that goes without saying, right? like, and don't try to talk hip hop, The worst thing anyone can do, black or white, is walk into a room and be like, yo, you know what I'm saying, B? Like, boom, I'm your teacher today, we're gonna rap. Like, that's whack. Don't do that. But anything else is fair game for all I care.
Okay. There's a couple about students themselves.
Yes.
I'm going to ask two. How do we plan while also leaving room for student choice and voice? Mm-hmm. And what do you do when not all students are familiar or responsive to hip hop?
Oh, let's start with the latter. Students aren't responsive to hip hop. That's fine. What are they responding to? And you're using it less as like, I love hip hop, and more about, I know what that is. Like, I may not love Taylor Swift's album, but I know Taylor Swift. So if someone says, it's like Taylor Swift, I'm like, oh, okay, I know what that is. The same thing goes. If you say, like, someone is like Moneybagg Yo, they may not like Moneybagg Yo, but they know that's a person and a strange persona, but they know it's a person, right? So that's how you connect. It's less about like, do you love hip hop? Then I'm gonna bring in everything you love. It's more about what are we universally listening to or watching or digesting? Let's talk about that. And if it's not rap music, use that. That's still using the ecosystem and the framework of having students use their voice in hip hop. Now, how do you plan and leave room for student voice? I think it's like a good script. I come from the theater world. So a great script, you don't need to improvise. But a great script, you have so much fun. Within structure, there's creativity. So you know exactly what you're gonna do, and because it's so well planned out, you can free flow all over the place and still come back to where you wanna go to. So as long as your structure is strong, you have to worry about like, do I have enough time to plan or do I have enough time to have student voice? It'll be part of the lesson plan, right? You ask the questions, students will respond. And don't be afraid of silence. I love silence, right? Every teacher says that, like, I love silence. You ask a question, just wait. I learned this actually from a police officer. I said, how do you get, people to respond to you? And the police officer said, I don't talk, I just listen. And eventually, they'll start talking. And I was like, I'm gonna use that. I'm gonna use that in class.
Oh my God, so many good questions. Okay. These are a bunch still more about students. I'm trying to break these into like categories. So students, then we're gonna go into like teacher training, then we're gonna go into systems. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm just gonna rattle.
Rattle them off. I'll be fast.
Excellent. How do you recommend using this framework in classrooms that with primarily students where English is not their first language or have migrated here?
Yes. It's still using the student youth culture, right? It's the culture of where they come from. So it may not be quote unquote hip hop music, but what is their popular culture? When I was working with young people from Bangladesh, we'd bring in hip hop, they're like, I don't really connect with this. And I was like, all right, well, what do you like? And they started bringing Bollywood. I was like, all right, well, let's talk about Bollywood. And we would connect Bollywood lessons to what they were studying. And eventually, they started rapping in English, even though they spoke Urdu when they arrived in class. So I think it's about like connecting with the young people wherever they are.
Okay, sorry.
Yes.
Just to pull it slightly away from schools for a second.
Yes.
There's a question here about a summer youth day camp.
Yes.
How do we relate to them and engage them in order for them to enjoy their time at the summer camp?
How do you engage with
It's an arts camp.
It's an arts camp. How do you engage with young people to enjoy their time at the arts camp?
Yeah, like how do you relate to them? The idea of like culturally responsive, I think.
Oh, okay, with the arts. I would incorporate arts that are relevant to what they're interested in, right? We in this room may all love Shakespeare, but young people may not love Shakespeare, right? And if you're doing a Shakespeare camp, can you connect it to other people that are linguists? You know, Aesop Rock invented more words than Shakespeare. Can we connect with Aesop Rock, right? That's one example. Beyonce, her use of language in many of her albums is unique, right? People think she's a simple linguist, but she's quite talented in the way she puts words together. How do you connect with that? So connecting to what young people are interested in, then connecting it right back to whatever you're teaching artistically. If you're talking about Victorian painting, you may use Kehinde Wiley before you use a Victorian artist from that time period.
Oh, God. Okay, great. You all, these questions are so good.
They're good.
Okay, so how can you connect with students who already feel targeted in school systems that promote punitive practices?
Ooh, show up. Show up. Young people, especially those of color, especially those from low-income schools, feel targeted. The minute they walk in the door, they're told to do something that they're not doing, or to be someone they aren't. So if you show up every day and appreciate them for who they are, regardless of how out of pocket they may seem, that's how you connect with them. I remember I was in the school, my first day of class, had a great lesson. I turned my back to wipe the whiteboard down, and a desk flies across the room, hits another kid in the head. And these kids go at it, fight, get arrested, and the class is over. And I was like, okay, that's day one of school, all right. I came back to school the next day, and the students were like, you're back? I said, yeah, why wouldn't I be back? They're like, y'all thought you'd be scared off. And I said, no, I'm here to teach. When those kids come back out of jail, I'll welcome them right back into class. And the students were like, oh, okay. And so I came back the next day. And I came back and didn't treat them differently, didn't treat like they were less than. I treated them like humans, like students. And I immediately was able to, not immediately, but I was able to connect with them over that time. And I think that's important, showing up and respecting the students no matter how out of pocket they may seem, because their behavior is adapting to their circumstance and not to you, right? They're just adapting to what they think they're supposed to do. And it's our job as educators to help them with their neuroplasticity, to say like, you can behave differently when this set of circumstances happens to you. That will help you better in life so you don't get locked up like your peers here. Or like, I've been locked up before, and no one wants to be in jail. It sucks. So let's not go to jail.
Okay, I'm gonna ask all of these.
At the same time?
Yeah.
I'm impressed.
You ready? Okay, so when do you navigate silence when asking students what matters to them? When students do not know how to use their voice or feel safe to do so? And are there any classroom management strategies that are hip hop?
Yeah,
Wait, there's one more, sorry.
Yes.
Still connected. Yeah, there are a few kids that don't want to engage, or there are kids placed in groups or pairs that stay quiet. So it's still about that, like.
So quiet,
okay.
Yeah.
Any tips or tools?
It's to still trust the process. Write it down if you don't want to say it out loud. Talk to your friend if you don't want to say it out loud. Think about it, draw a picture if you don't want to say it out loud, right? And then at some point, explain what your picture means. Explain what your words mean on paper. Do you want to share what your friend said to you that you heard? If it's, I had one student who was selectively mute. And every day, come to class, I started starting a cipher, and every day we get to her, and she would pass. She wouldn't say pass, she just wouldn't talk. But she sat in the circle every day. And maybe 6 months in, go around the circle, reflecting on the lesson. She said it was good. And the entire class said, and then we just kept the circle moving because we built that level of respect and trust that it wasn't like, oh, snap, yo, Beyonce's talking, Bianca's talking. It was like, oh, yeah, she used her voice today. Respect. So trust the process. You show up every day, you treat them as students, as human beings, you respect them if they're silent, if they're very vocal. Just trust them and let them be themselves. Slowly, not overnight, they will come around.
Okay, so we're gonna move from students into
Students.
like educators.
Educators.
So for newer teaching artists, how do you suggest using knowledge of self when we are ourselves discovering who we are in this ever-changing world?
Ooh. We are all messed up post-COVID. I just want to say that. We have not had time to reflect on the past 4 years. So that's a great question. One is to sit in a room by yourself with no cell phone or no TV and just look at the wall and think about yourself. That's the first step. I'm being serious. I do this on occasion. I'll just sit at home on my couch, no devices, and stare at the wall and just reflect. Sometimes I'll cry, sometimes I won't, but it's important. It's an important part of connecting back to myself. Then you ought to do the same thing for the young people. That knowledge of self is about love, self-love, right? There's a poem by Luis Valdez that says, it's in Lakesh, I'm your other you, right? So whatever harm I do to you, I do to myself. Whatever love I give to you, I do to myself. Whatever I do to myself, I also do to you. So I think thinking about that as working with students and being a student is important. Just to say, like, I love you. Do you love yourself? And I mean that. Like, I love you. Do you love yourself? They may say no. They may say no 20 times in a row. But eventually, they'll hear it enough to say, yeah, I do love myself, right? The brain you need 5 positive interactions to overcome 1 negative one, right? The brain is like Teflon with positivity. So you got to keep laying it with olive oil. So you just got to keep the positive up. Keep that up, keep it up, don't stop, won't stop, and just love the students.
Are there any schools or districts that are doing this work right now? I'm just wondering if we're wondering about how to shift school cultures and school communities.
Yes, there are schools doing this work. I wouldn't say districts doing this work. Some through work that I've been doing, some through work that my peers have been doing. Jay Rawls and John Robinson, my two of my 4 partners in the Adventures, are doing this work in Kentucky, and they're working with the entire school district. I take that back. So that's an entire school district in Kentucky. They're working with them on hip-hop education. I'm doing it in Snohomish County in Seattle area. Also Highline Schools, also below Seattle. Chicago Public Schools, I said, just bought my books, so that'll be part of their school system.
You said Chicago Public Schools?
Chicago Public Schools, yeah.
And is there specific funding for this work?
They have funding for this work, yeah. I was going to defame Washington State for a second, but yes. Washington State we're ranked number 46 out of 50 in terms of arts funding, and we rank number 2 out of 50 in terms of absenteeism. So if you want to talk about a correlation between lack of arts and not coming to class, there's that. So yes, there's arts funding in Chicago.
Wow. Yeah. How do we begin training future teachers and educators to lean into their authentic self in the classroom rather than the standard idea of what the teacher-student relationship, quote unquote, should be?
Let it go. Let it, like Frozen, let it go. Let it go. Yeah, when I was trained to be a teacher, it was very much like you have to be stern, don't smile, right? Stand at the front of the classroom. You realize over time that it's not helping. And I realized for me that the more I did it, the less I was being able to interact with young people. So as soon as I was just me, I was like, yo, I'm a silly guy. I have a stutter. I have a speech impediment. Things happen to me. I fall down frequently. I'm klutz. I'm okay with that. I like hip hop. I also like country music. Just being totally James Miles makes me fresh. So I think that's for anyone to be fresh just by being yourself.
A follow-up to that is how does lack of self-knowledge manifest?
Lack of self-knowledge manifests when you ignore those trauma-informed moments of your life. When something happens and you go, that's okay, without saying, is it okay? That's how you start losing that love of self. It's important. We live in such a fast-paced society where we have to do. It's so key we slow down sometimes and just say, like, am I really dealing with what just happened? Like I said, COVID. Are we really dealing with what just happened? Several million people died. Are we reflecting on that? Not like wallowing in it, but have we really just let that hit us? Like, we are all survivors of a post-apocalyptic movie? Like, that really just happened to all of us. But we let it go. And I think sometimes you have to sit in it. You have to say, like, yo, part of my language, but this shit sucks. And it's okay. And it's okay for shit to suck sometimes, because I know there'll be tomorrow.
Okay, so we've been given a hook. The hook is on.
Okay.
It's coming.
I'm ready.
We're winding down. So
Wind down.
These last questions, I didn't get to all of them, unfortunately, but these last questions, I think if you can move to the next one. I don't know where we are. I know I should get up, but I can't. To the book.
The books,
so there's
yes.
questions here about, is your book available today?
Yes.
Excellent. If I or we as educators read your book and implement some of these strategies, do we become knighted as hip-hop educators?
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
And can they reach out to you?
Yes.
Okay.
James Malice at freshprofessor.com
Sweet.
is my email address. I'm also freshprofessor.com. And my books are in the back. I'll be signing some books back there you can buy them online, or you can buy some that I have in stock today.
Okay, so who or what has been the biggest influence on you writing this book, and what is a fun book that you're reading, or a book that you're reading for fun?
Who inspired me to write this book? I would say Courtney, Edie, Shoba, Lindsay, Michael, all inspired me to write this book. I would also say my dad. My dad, when I was in school, I wanted to be an actor. And my dad said, you can't be an actor and never make a living. And so I became an accountant. I lasted 2 months. I was terrible at it. I mean, I could do my job well. I was just terrible at it. One day my dad calls me. He's like, you hate this job, don't you? And I said, like nothing else. And he says, you should not be doing this. You should become an actor. And I said, really? He's like, yeah, you should follow your passion. So I quit and became an actor, and I was an actor for 25 years. So this book is also dedicated to my father who just passed. So he inspired me because he was like, follow your dreams. And I say that to every student, follow your dreams, because you never know what's going to happen.
Great advice. So in our last button, I think if you go to the final slide, no, there's a thank you. There's the one where there's a QR code.
Yeah.
So this is where you could buy the book, but there are also books at the back. James is going to sign them. Also on your chairs, or some of the chairs, are postcards to learn. If you're not already a listener, you should be, to Teaching Artistry. We have lots and lots of guests, and as I said in the beginning, this will be playing as the next, there's an episode that's dropping this week and next week, and then the next one will be this conversation. James.
Courtney.
You the best.
You the rock. You the rock. You're my rock.
And thank you all so much. I also will, if you're okay with it, I will share these as part of my, editing process.
I love that.
In the episode.
I love that. This is such an honor. Thank you all for being here. This is great. And thank you, Courtney. Thank you, Shoba. Thank you, Amy and Alexandra.
Yes.
This is awesome. You guys are awesome. You're awesome, man.
Thank you so much.